Moving on in your handout, we're now on page 34 in the handout, and that is correct. We're going to look at phrase elements, and these indicate the context and meaning of the text, and they are tags that are used in line with the actual text. And the four that we're going to look at here, we're going to learn because we're learning basic HTML coding. And before CSS, Cascading Style Sheets, really became mainstream and we did all of our stylizing that way, this is how we had to stylize. They're not really current practice right now because we, again, handle that styling more often in style sheets, but if you needed to use them, we're going to learn how to do that, and this is the process that this book takes us through. We learn basic HTML tags first, and then we learn to improve upon it. So the first one is bold, and the tag for that is the B tag and a closing B. And in that case, text is displayed in bold font. Strong, the same thing happens. It's displayed in bold, but it's a better tag because screen readers actually know how to interpret this one when they read back. They give it a strong importance. They emphasize that word or strengthen that word, if you will. So a bold tag will look bold on the screen, as will a strong tag, but in a screen reader, nothing will be changed as far as emphasis or dialect or projection by the screen reader until it hits a strong tag, and then it will. Same is true for I for italics and M for emphasis. In both cases, the text wrapped in these tags is going to be displayed in an italic font, but if emphasis tags are used, a screen reader will know to give those words special emphasis when speaking them, whereas italic, it will not say anything different. So those are a few of our phrase elements. If you look at page 34 in your handout, you're going to see even more. We're going to see small, which is one we're actually going to use quite a bit, and that will make whatever text is in those small tags appear at a much smaller font size than your basic paragraphs are. And we see other tags in here. So again, not as common, not used as much anymore. So if we move on, again, it's the way the screen readers speak them that makes them different. Another thing to quickly discuss is proper nesting, meaning that when you open a tag, for example, this paragraph tag, and then an italic tag, you close them in the opposite order. So in this case, everything between the P tags is part of the paragraph. Call for a free quote for your web development needs, and then a phone number. Everything between the two I tags, which is right here and here, should be in italic. So all of this is in italic. And then what is between the strong tag, right here, this also appears bold or strong. So when you actually go to close them out, it's the one that you first opened gets closed last, and the last one you opened is the first to get closed. So this is how it would display actually on your browser. It would all be in italics, but the phone number itself would be strong. All right, we're going to move on in our handout to page 36, and we're going to look at how to create lists, meaning ordered lists and unordered. So ordered lists convey information in an ordered fashion, typically with numbers, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, that's the default. However, it could be uppercase letters, lowercase letters, Roman numerals, or lowercase Roman. That's something that you change in the actual code if you want it to be different than just numerals. So the whole entire list has to be wrapped in an opening and closing OL tag, ordered list, and then each item within the list is a list item, and therefore each item is wrapped with opening list tags and a closing list tag after each specific item in the list. So here's an example, page 37 in your book is what we're going to look at and type in just a second. But here's an ordered list, so we see the opening and closing tag, and then each of the individual items, number 1, 2, 3, and 4, are wrapped in LI tags and a closing LI. So again, because default is numbers, we get 1, 2, 3, 4, and this is how it appears in your browser. So if we go to our handout, page 37, and we look at this sample, And let's just change our title in the HTML page that we're working on. And let's just save this to be ordered list. When we get inside here, we could say my favorite colors could be the heading 1. And they don't have any paragraphs or anything else, so I'm just going to wipe out all this extra stuff. So inside the body tags, this is what actually shows up on our page. So far we have a heading 1 of my favorite colors. And then to do an ordered list, we do OL, and then we do our closing OL tag. And then each item we have to wrap with list item tags. So LI, and then your closing LI, and whatever we put in here is going to be number 1. So in here I'm going to have, and you don't need to type number 1. My favorite colors are yellow, and then LI, purple, and green. So that's an example. And then the whole thing closes out. I'm just removing all of these spaces to visually show you. I think it looks a little bit cleaner when things are tabbed in. It's also easier to proofread your code when you do this. So here's the OL tag, the ordered list, and then all 3 items, list items, are wrapped in LI tags. So save this document over here and then go to run it in Chrome or view it in Chrome or refresh it. And sure enough, you get a heading 1 and then you get a numbered list because we intentionally said OL, ordered list. If we move on to unordered lists on page 38 in your handout, everything is the same except the wrapping tag. Instead of being an OL for ordered, it's a UL for unordered, which means bullet points. So now this isn't going to say 1, 2, 3, and by that we assume this is my first favorite, second favorite, third favorite. In an unordered list, it's just going to be bullet points. And when we come over here and refresh, we now just see a bullet point. And again, this doesn't necessarily say that yellow is my number 1. It kind of appears that all 3 of them are my equal favorite colors. So OL and UL are the 2 differentiating factors. Unordered list is with bullet points. Again, each item is a LI, but the entire list is wrapped in a UL. The next item in our handout is a description list. This has also been called a definition list. And basically what this is used to do is kind of like a definition list, really, where you would have a word that you would want defined. So that word would be bold, perhaps, and on a main line, not necessarily, but then the actual definition of it would be indented on a line below. So often it's used for FAQ, frequently asked question page, and the entire definition list itself, the whole thing, is wrapped in DL tags. That's the whole definition list. Then each term that you have, or say a word to describe or a frequently asked question, that would be wrapped in DT, so that's the term or the name, and then the answer, the definition or description, is wrapped in DD tags. So in order to make a definition list, you need 3 tags: DL, the term DT, and the definition DD. The whole entire thing is wrapped in DL tags. And this is how it would look. So you can see the term that they gave you is IP, and the definition, what it stands for, Internet Protocol. The term TCP, what does that mean? Transmission Controlled Protocol. So if we bump ahead to page 41 in our handout, we have a definition list. I'm not going to copy that one in the same because it's a whole lot of typing, and I just want to give you a little bit easier showcase of this. So let's jump back to your HTML file that we've been working on over here, and let's take everything out, or no, let's change our heading 1 to be sample description list, also called the definition list. And then let's wipe out the bulleted list that we had before. So in this case, we're going to put an entire definition list. So we're going to do our opening DL tag, and then we're going to close it out several lines down. So anything between these two tags is going to be our definition list. The first item or term, DT, let's do a frequently asked questions. Why do we have to go to school? Question mark. That's your question. And then again, I'm entering and going down a line in code. I don't have to. It's just easier to proofread for me. I could continue with the next line of code right here. It would not matter. I'm going to say DD, that's the definition. And what I'm putting in here is the answer. Why do I have to go to school? Because you want an education and it is fun. Haha. So let me just prove a point by sucking this up to the line above. I want to show you my code is all on one line. However, when I view this, it's not, whoops. When I view this, it is not going to look that way over here. This is what a description list does. Your main term is on this line, and then your definition, the DD, always comes down a line and is indented. So the fact that I ran it all together here in my code doesn't change how it's appeared. Again, in code, I would always put this down a line and maybe even tab it in just so I can easily see what I'm doing. So then I could go on to my next frequently asked question, DT, why is the sun yellow? And my next answer could be because it is happy. Brilliant, right? So you could go on and on and on with a definition list. I'm going to stop mine at 2, so I'm just going to suck up all this extra space. The key here is to remember that the entire definition list has to be wrapped in DL tags. And then individually, each term or question and answer has to be wrapped in separate tags as well. So save that and refresh your preview over here, and there's my second one. All right, let's move on to page 42 in your handout. You see some special characters. If you want a copyright symbol to show up, or the ampersand, which is the and sign, you need to use actual code. I think the copyright symbol, this is obvious because nowhere on our keyboard do we see the copyright symbol. However, on our keyboard, we definitely see the open caret, close caret, or greater than and less than sign, and we see the ampersand. But simply typing them in on our keyboard does not necessarily work in all browsers, and it's not good practice. So this is a non-breaking space, which means it intentionally puts a blank spot in. And again, I can show you that, let's say between the word why and do, I wanted a bunch of spaces, and I just hit return, or not return, spacebar, 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 and I saved it. When I refresh it, I don't have 6 spaces between why and do. In order to get that, if I really wanted that for some crazy reason, I would have to use ampersand, non-breaking space, semicolon, I just say that out loud so I spelled it right, NBSP, and I'm going to copy and paste that in a few times to show you this is the only way I'm going to get 4 spaces between those words, is by using those special characters. So do you see how it put in the 4 spaces over here? Hitting spacebar on my keyboard didn't cut it. I had to use the non-breaking space special entities. So take that out, go back to normal. Before we practice this, let me just clean this up. Whoops, cancel. Save and refresh. Okay, that filled that in. So hands-on on page 43. We don't need to open template. We already have it done, so none of this is valid actually. Delete that out. We're just going to go and do our hands-on on page 43. So back in our code, whether we're using Notepad or brackets, we're going to basically recreate what we see in figure 213, but we're not necessarily going to type in exactly what they have. You can if you would like to, you certainly don't have to. So now they're kind of trying to walk us through thinking a little bit more. So when we look at the top of page 43, we see after the introductory paragraph, we see change the title of the web page to Web Design Steps. So we know that we have to go between the title tags and we have to change this to read Web Design Steps. So that takes care of the first direction. The sample that we're going to make contains a heading, an unordered list, and copyright information. So the first thing they want us to do is configure the phrase Web Design Steps as a level 1 heading. So in our body section, they want us to have a heading 1. We already have that ready to go. We just need to change out the actual type, the words, Web Design Steps. Then they want us to create a list. So I'm going to take out this definition list. They want an unordered list, which is a bulleted list, UL. And we have an opening and a closing tag with lots of space in between where we're actually going to put each item. So make your opening tag, go down a few lines, and type your closing tag. All right, the first bullet point that they want us to have. So again, bullet points are list items, LI, and then your closing tag is going to come at the end of it. First thing they want us to do, they also want this to show up in bold, but to be spoken strong by the screen reader. So we're going to wrap this first part in a strong tag. And the words that we wrap are going to be determine the intended audience. And that's the only words that they want strong and bold, so we can close our strong tag after that. And then if you look at the sample that they have in the book, the next paragraph of text, they actually want down a line and no longer bold. We already stopped the strong, so that's perfect, but in order to force it down a line, we need to use the break tag, BR. And I'm going to just jump down a line, but I wouldn't have to. I could continue typing right here, just understand that. After that break tag, we're just going to write the next paragraph that they have. So the colors, images, fonts, and layout should be blah, 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 da, 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 period, and then another sentence. So as you can see, I'm typing gibberish, and I need to put a few spaces every now and then, otherwise I found out it does crazy things. So if you want to type out all of those sentences, feel free. So that is the end of our first bullet point. So I'm just going to put that closing LI at the end of that, right here. Again, in Notepad++ and in brackets, when you click on an opening tag, like I did here, it lights up and the closing tag should light up. In Notepad, I'm pretty sure it does this in purple, but if you click on one tag and you don't see the other light up, you either forgot it or you typed it wrong, like a typo, or you forgot the backslash, or maybe you forgot one of the carets. Something's wrong. They should both light up if they're correct. So instead of typing in a bunch of different bullet points, I'm simply going to copy and paste this one 4 times so that we can see what this would look like. All right, so this is an unordered list that has 1, 2, 3, 4 bullet points in it. Saving the file and running it over here in Chrome shows the results. We have an unordered list, a bulleted list. The first part of it we wanted to be bold and strong specifically. So instead of using bold tags, we wrapped it in strong tags so that the screen reader would say it strongly also. And then we intentionally wanted a line break before we went into the blurb, the sentence. So we used a break code. And then that was the end of list item, the first one. Then we have our second, third, and fourth list items. So if this were to be a numbered list, all we would have to do is go back over here and change it from a UL to an OL. So if these were steps that had to be done in a certain order, just by changing that opening and closing UL to an OL, we see it changes to numbers, 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay. All right. Validating your syntax. So before you upload homework, I want you to go through on your HTML and, like I said, click on opening tags and make sure that closing tags show up. That's the simplest way to do it. But because you have this awesome option of using an actual validator, why not do that as well? So I'm going to save this document over here. I'm just going to see where I'm saving it. So save as, I'm going to call this one, you don't need to do this, I'm just going to show you, test.html, and I'm going to put it on my desktop for now. What I want to show you is that there's a website that you can go and validate your code. If you forget this URL, don't worry about that. Just go into your browser and type in HTML validator. The first option that shows up should be this link, which is the W3C website right here, W3C Markup Validation Service. And what we get here, once it loads. All right, so once that page loads, you can validate by typing in the URI or the URL, which is the web address. You could validate your file by file upload, which we're going to do, or you could type in the code directly here to see if it validates. I'm going to do this file upload version, and in this case, you can check your homework before you submit it. So I'm going to choose the file, and the one that I just saved to my desktop was called test.html. I just did that to show you this process. I'm going to say open, and then I'm going to click on the check. And this is what you want to see. Excuse me. You want green and no errors or warnings. If I had something wrong in here, let's say that I forgot to close this OL, but all I did was I forgot that backslash. So you see how when I'm looking at this quickly, it looks fine to me. However, if I click up here, notice it's not lighting up the bottom tag. Something's wrong. So if for whatever reason I didn't notice it here and I couldn't find my error, or I didn't think I had one, I'm going to save that. I'm going to do that again. I'm going to go back and upload this test file again. And now look what happened. It says I have 4 errors, and we know I only have 1. But all of these kind of build on each other. So if you ever get results back that look like you have 17 errors, I want you to start with the first one, see if you can figure out what it's asking for, and go fix it, and then test it again. Because quite often, you're going to wipe out 3 or 4 errors in one shot. So what it's saying is that element OL is not allowed as a child of OL. So everything happening after that, notice it's got my OL tag highlighted and there's no backslash. So I know that there's some sort of a problem, and it tells me it's on line 19. So I can come back in here and I can look at it and I go, oh, I forgot the backslash. And by putting in the backslash, cleaning that up, notice I light up again, it works. And I could run it through the validator and it would once again work. Just fast forwarding because we've already talked about CSS as well. I want to also show you that there is a CSS validation service. So if you were to go to Google and type in CSS validator, because we're now several weeks ahead. This same W3C has the same thing for CSS. Please make sure if you're doing this, they look exactly the same, but up here it says markup validation for HTML, and on this one it says CSS validation. So if you accidentally try to validate your HTML on this site, it's not going to work. And if you try to validate your CSS on this site, it's not going to work. So just be aware of that. All right, let's go back. And the last section that we're going to cover before we stop at this point is HTML structural elements. And this is basically how we organize our web page so that later on we can stylize it. So we know that there is a chunk of our page that's going to stay the same at the top always, from one page in the website to the next, and that's what we call our header. That's maybe the company logo, the company name, and a pretty picture, maybe the phone number. It's whatever is always displayed at the top of every single website. Then we always have a section called nav, or navigation, and that's where our links or buttons usually are. That can be left to right across the top. Sometimes we have our navigation bar running over here as a up and down option on the left hand side. But anything inside here, later on we can say anything that's in the nav tags I want to have on a baby blue background with white type, and anything inside of these two nav tags will be stylized that way. Your main section is the main content for that page. I'll get back to that. And then the footer is where this is also the same on every single page. It's typically your full address, phone numbers, maybe your social media links are down here, something like that. So on any given web page in your site, the header's the same, the nav's the same, the footer's the same, but from page to page, the main content usually is what changes. So this gives consistency and continuity to your pages. They look like they work together. So the other thing that we often have is a div tag. And I'm going to mention those, but we aren't really going to work with them too much in this class because it's kind of an upper broad view of HTML and CSS. But divs kind of stand for like a division or a divider, and that's just something that later on you want to stylize in a certain way. So think of it as perhaps a big clear tote that you would put stuff in. Maybe your kids' winter clothes when spring finally hits. So it's this big clear tote, and inside of it you're going to put something and you're going to label it on the front with a name of what it actually is, like boys' winter clothes. And then later on, if you want to stylize that section, that div, you can call it out by calling it whatever you labeled it with, boys' winter clothes, for example. You can also put other divs inside it. So you could put smaller clear plastic totes with other labels on them inside and stylize them differently. All right. So here's an example of the Trillium Media design, which is the practice that we're going to do next. And the body is everything that you see on the page. And we're going to actually use these 4 sections. So the header is going to be whatever we see at the top of every single page. In this case, it's just going to be something simple. It's going to be some type, but quite often it's a photo, it's a logo, it's words, it's a bunch of different things. Everything we put in our navigation is going to be our nav controls. We're going to use 3 text words in this case. Everything in our main tags is going to be all of this. So in this case, it's going to be 2 H2s and some paragraphs. And then in the footer, we're going to put copyright information and then our name. And that's going to stay constant from one page to another. So the last thing we're going to do in this section today is hands-on practice 211 on page 47. And we're going to start with a blank. Actually, we're going to do a couple of things. I'm going to minimize a bunch of this. And what I want you to do is I want you to create a new folder on your desktop or your jump drive, but I want you to start with a new folder. So right-click and new folder. and we're going to call this one Trillium. And everything that we do for this practice, we're going to put in this Trillium folder. So we're going to put our main index page in here. There's going to be a services page eventually and a contact page eventually. Later down the road, we're going to have a CSS document inside here, and we're going to have some images, but they all need to live inside this one folder so that when pages are loaded and we tell it to go to a new page, it knows it's only going to look inside this folder unless we code it differently. So make that folder first, then go back to brackets, and let's just clean up this file to where it's a clean template again. So if you still have that template file you can open, you can do that. Otherwise, we can just wipe out this extra information, and this is our basic clean file. Doc type is at the top, our opening and closing HTML tags, opening and closing head, opening and closing title, the character set, opening and closing body. So this is our main skeleton, if you will. So on page 47, step 1, they want us to modify the page by changing the title tags to say Trillium Media Design. So go ahead and type that in between the title tags. Then it says position your cursor in the body section. Oops, so that's in here. And it says code the header element. So remember from the PowerPoint slide that I showed you, whoops, let's make a blog. Let's not. Just go to, in your handout that you're looking at right now, the opposite page, page 46. In that wireframe layout, we have a header at the top, nav, and then either div or main or content. That could be any of those words, and then the footer at the bottom. So step 2 is saying that we want to stylize a header. So we're going to do an opening and closing header tag. And all this is going to do is later when we give it a style rule, for instance, tell it to have a green background and red text. If we tell a header to act that way, anything and everything inside the header will follow those rules. So within the header, we have the words Trillium Media Design, but specifically we want those to be in a heading 1 size. So use the H1 tags and type in Trillium Media Design, and that's it. So we have a header tag, and within our header, we have a heading 1 that says Trillium Media Design. All right, then step 3 says to code a nav element. So we're going to do a nav and our closing nav tag. And anything inside here is going to be our navigation, but we'll be able to stylize anything within these nav tags. So what they want us to do is they want all of these to appear in bold type. So we're going to use the B tag. And they want us to have the word home and then a non-breaking space. So you can hit space on your keyboard once in your code here, but it's still not going to give you what you want. So we have to do ampersand, non-breaking space, semicolon, NBSP, semicolon. The next word they want is services, and another non-breaking space. And then the last word that they want is contact. We don't need to put a space after that because that's our last word. And then we close out the bold, and that's the end of our navigation section. So I can clean this up just by pulling up some lines. All right. I'm just hitting in tabs here to make this a little bit visually cleaner. There we go. So inside our body, we have a header section and we have a nav section so far. Then, step 4, they want us to code an element within a div. So this could be main, it could be content, or they're specifically telling us to do div. So we're going to use a div tag and close that out. And everything inside of here that they want from us is a heading 2 and a paragraph. So heading 2 is New Media and Web Design. And then after that, excuse me, they want a paragraph. And it's going to say, Trillium Media Design will bring your company's web presence to the next level. I want you to notice in your handout how the word companies, instead of having an actual apostrophe, they used the web special character code, ampersand RSQO semicolon. And for best practices, we're going to do the same. So go ahead and type in the information you see in step 4. All right, after you've typed that in, inside of the div element, we have a heading 2 and a paragraph. We have a heading 2 and a paragraph. Let's save this file, and remember we want to save it specifically in the Trillium folder that we made on our desktop. So we're going to do a File, Save As, and make sure that you navigate to your desktop and that you navigate to the folder that you made called Trillium. And our starting pages always have to be named index.html. They cannot be named Home. They cannot be named Trillium Media. They cannot be named Brenda's Index. In order for a web browser to pull this up as the starting page on any website, it 100% has to be named index.html. So in the Trillium folder, I have a file named index.html. And if I do a run in Chrome like you guys do, I'm going to do a live preview. And there it is. So I have a heading 1 that happens to be in my header section, but I haven't stylized it yet. Then we have something in our navigation section, which right now is just 3 words in bold and spaces between them. Then I have a heading 2 and a paragraph, and a heading 2 and a paragraph. That's as far as we are right now in our code. So that's perfect. Then if we move on to the final step, step 5, they say configure the footer element to contain a copyright notice displayed in a small font size, use the small element, and italic font, use the I element. Be careful to properly nest them. So remember that whatever you opened last is the first to be closed. So first thing we're going to do is make a footer section. So, whoops, wrong way. Open and close your footer section. And then within it, they said they wanted it to be small and italic. So we're going to start with the small tag first, and then the italic, or letter I. And then I'm just spacing out because mine automatically did the closing tags. You should go and close those out yourself. Now whatever we type between these will be small and italic. And what they want us to do is the word copyright, and then the actual symbol, which is ampersand COPY semicolon, and then the year, 2019, and then your name here. And then we're done, and that's where our closing tags would come into play. So I'll just backspace these out. And in the opposite order that I open them, I am closing my italics, and then I'm closing my small tags. And that's everything that is going inside my footer. So we cut this up into those 4 pieces, those 4 wireframes that you see on page 46. We have a header section, a navigation section, our main content, which we wrapped in div tags, and we have a footer. And that, if you save that, hopefully it's already named index and it's already in the Trillium folder, and we had a live preview, it automatically populated for me over here. So notice that the word copyright is smaller. That small tag did that. It's italicized, and we do have our copyright symbol. So that gets us through page 47, and that is our stopping point for this week as well.